Welcome back to Educator.com. Today we're going to start on the mathematics section of the SAT. So we'll have an introduction and then we'll start getting into some strategies for it. Our legal disclaimer: test names are the registered trademarks of the respective owners. Said owners are not affiliated with Educator.com. The College Board was not involved in production of and does not endorse this course. So this lesson is going to start off with a short introduction to the mathematics section of the SAT, just the really basic stuff that probably you already have a good idea of. Then we're going to talk about some important things you want to keep in mind whenever you're working on the math stuff in this section, and possibly when you're working on math in general. Finally, we're going to talk about some specific strategies and tactics that you can use on these math questions. So these math questions, but also math questions that you could go in any math class. So any math question that you'll see, you'll actually be able to use some of these on them, and some of them on lots of math tests. So a lot of these strategies are actually pretty generalizable, which is really cool. All right, let's get started. The math section of the SAT is probably the most direct of all the sections. It's exactly what you think it's going to be. The section will give you math problems, and it's going to be your job to figure out the answer. Simple as that. Unlike critical reading or writing, it's going to be just like the math homework you've been doing for the last 10 years or more than 10 years. This is great because in critical reading, in writing, you're getting stuff that you really don't actually do that often. Like if you're writing an essay in, an AP composition class, you aren't getting a bunch of small grammar mistakes that you then have to sort through and figure out which one's right and which one's wrong. You're just writing essays regularly or doing something else. And same with critical reading. You're probably writing papers on things, not answering really specific questions about really small sections of text. So you've been thinking in a much different way than the English sections require. The English sections in the SAT are basically requiring you to use a skill that you've sort of been training in school, but haven't been directly training. But math, you've been directly training for it. It's just what you've been doing for a long time now. It's just like any homework assignment. You get problems, you answer problems. And yeah, okay, there are more concepts on this than you're going to have in any one homework assignment, but that doesn't mean that these concepts are special, that they're any different from the concepts you've already been used to. So you've almost certainly been exposed to all the concepts before. And if you haven't, at least the vast majority. So don't think that just because there's a lot of things on the test, and yeah, there are a fair number of concepts that are going to be on this test, but just because there's a lot of things doesn't mean you haven't already done probably all of them. And if you haven't done all of them, you've almost certainly done almost all of them. So don't think that it's really hard and difficult and there's a bunch of new stuff you have to be prepared for. No, what you need to do is just sort of get used to what you did before. Get back into the habit of all the math tricks and ideas and concepts that you've learned previously. And also, I think this is great, you don't have to worry about that best choice garbage. Remember in the English section, you have to choose the best choice? Well, in the math section, there's just one answer. You choose the answer, and that's that. You don't have to worry about being, well, this one kind of works, but maybe there's one that works better. As soon as you find one that works, you're done. So I think that's really nice. The only weird thing that you might see is the subsection called the student-produced response questions, also known as grid-in questions. So there's a total of 54 math questions, and 10 of those 54 are going to be grid-in questions. So they're just like normal questions as far as the problem. The problem is going to be basically what you've seen on all the rest of them. The only difference is that you won't have choices, and you're going to have to grid in your answer. So you don't select from 5 choices like you do on all the other multiple choices. You work the answer out on your own, and then you enter it into a grid. So if you haven't seen the grid-in section, just flip to any grid-in section in, an SAT test booklet, and you'll be able to go, oh, I see exactly what you're talking about. It's basically just a bunch of columns where you choose a number or, depending on the column, a slash or a decimal point. So it's basically just a way of being able to write out a number on a Scantron. It's like when you write out your name on a Scantron. You bubble in corresponding letters. In this case, you bubble in corresponding numbers. Same sort of thing. So the grid won't accept negatives, and it only has 4 columns. So that means at the lowest, your number will be 0, and at the absolute maximum, it's going to be 9,999. The grid can accept whole numbers, decimal numbers, and fractions. So there's a section just above the column. So there will be 4 columns full of things to bubble. And above that, is a place for you to write in your number. So you might be able to write like 314, right? Though it would actually have 4 columns, so there'd be a 4th one. So you might be able to write in that number. But if you write it in and you don't bubble in anything, you won't get any credit. Writing it in is just to help make sure you don't make any mistakes, to help you have something to reference. You can be like, oh, it was a 3 here, so I'm going to bubble in a 3. Oh, it was a 1 here, so I'm going to bubble in a 1, etc., etc. So you have to bubble in. Remember, you have to bubble into the grid to actually get credit. If you write the number down, that's not enough. It's just a step to help you bubble things in. You could even bubble in your answer without writing it down, but you might make a mistake. Also,